Northern California, late 1960s. A quiet stretch of road, a parked car, two young people enjoying what seemed like an ordinary evening. Then everything changed. A mysterious killer emerged from the darkness. He targeted young couples. He struck without warning, and just as suddenly, he disappeared. But the murders were only the beginning. Unlike most serial killers, this man wanted the world to know his name. He wrote chilling letters to newspapers. He filled them with cryptic symbols, disturbing messages, and terrifying threats. Then he challenged police to catch him. Every letter deepened the mystery. Every attack spread more fear. Every clue seemed to raise even more questions. For years, investigators searched for answers. They interviewed witnesses. They collected evidence. They chased countless leads. Yet the man behind the killings was never identified. More than half a century has passed. New technology has uncovered new clues. Old evidence has been re-examined. Some of his secret codes have finally been solved. But the biggest mystery remains unsolved. Who was the Zodiac Killer? And how did one man manage to outsmart investigators for more than 50 years? This is one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer operated mainly across Northern California between 1968 and 1969. It was a time when people believed quiet neighborhoods were safe. Young couples often drove to secluded roads for peace and privacy. No one imagined that those same places would soon become scenes of unimaginable violence. Unlike most serial killers, the Zodiac wasn't satisfied with remaining invisible. He wanted attention. He wanted headlines. And above all, he wanted fear. After every attack, he made sure the public knew he was still out there. He mailed handwritten letters to newspapers. Inside were detailed descriptions of crimes that only the killer could have known. He mocked investigators. He criticized the police. And he demanded that his letters be published on newspaper front pages. If his demands were ignored, he threatened to kill again. Soon, the entire region was living under a cloud of fear. Parents warned their children to stay home after dark. Young couples became afraid of isolated roads. Every unfamiliar face, every parked car, every late-night phone call raised new suspicions. Then there was this symbol. A simple circle, crossed by a bold plus sign. It appeared on his letters. It appeared in his messages. And before long, it became one of the most recognizable symbols in criminal history. Despite the growing panic, investigators had very little to work with. The killer left behind almost no reliable evidence. No clear identity. No confirmed motive. Only a trail of violence. A series of cryptic messages. And a mystery that would challenge law enforcement for decades to come. The Zodiac Killer has been officially linked to 5 murders and 2 survivors. His first confirmed attack took place on December 20th, 1968. The location was Lake Herman Road. A quiet, isolated stretch of highway outside the small town of Berryessa. 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen were sitting inside their parked car. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. Instead, it became the beginning of one of America's most infamous unsolved murder cases. The killer approached without warning. Within moments, gunshots shattered the silence. Both teenagers were killed. When investigators arrived, they found very little evidence. No clear motive, no eyewitnesses, no obvious suspect. At the time, no one realized that a serial killer had just claimed his first known victims. Just over 6 months later, on the night of July 4th, 1969, the killer struck again. This time, at Blue Rock Springs Park. Darlene Farron and Michael Mageau were sitting inside a parked car. A vehicle slowly pulled up beside them. Then it drove away. For a brief moment, it seemed like nothing had happened. But only minutes later, the same car returned. A man stepped out. He walked toward the vehicle, Without saying a word, he opened fire. Michael Mageau survived the attack. Darlene Ferrin did not. Just 40 minutes later, someone calmly called the police from a nearby payphone. The caller confessed to the shootings. He also claimed responsibility for the murders at Lake Herman Road. For investigators, there was no longer any doubt. The two attacks were connected. The nightmare was only beginning. On September 27, 1969, the Zodiac changed his method once again. This time, he attacked in broad daylight. At the peaceful shores of Lake Berryessa, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were enjoying a quiet afternoon by the lake. Then a stranger appeared. He was dressed in a black executioner's hood. Across his chest was a strange symbol, a circle, crossed by a bold plus sign, the symbol that would soon become infamous around the world. The man calmly tied the couple's hands. At first, he claimed he only wanted money and a car. But moments later, he pulled out a knife. The attack was brutal. Both victims were stabbed multiple times. Before leaving, the killer walked to Hartnell's car. Using a black marker, he wrote the dates of his previous attacks, and for the first time, he signed his work. Brian Hartnell survived. Cecilia Shepard died 2 days later. Less than 2 weeks passed before the Zodiac struck again. On October 11th, 1969, taxi driver Paul Stein picked up a passenger in San Francisco. It seemed like a routine fare. But the journey ended in murder. The killer shot Stein inside the taxi. Then, he calmly removed a piece of the victim's blood-stained shirt. Witnesses watched as the suspect walked away from the scene. Police officers were only blocks away. Incredibly, they even encountered a man matching the killer's appearance. But because of an incorrect radio description, the suspect was mistakenly allowed to leave. It was one of the closest moments investigators ever came to capturing the Zodiac Killer. And yet, he vanished once again. More than half a century has passed. Thousands of pages of evidence have been collected. Hundreds of investigators have worked this case. Countless theories have been explored. Yet the identity of the Zodiac Killer remains one of the greatest mysteries in criminal history. He left behind crime scenes. He left behind letters. He left behind ciphers. But he never left behind a clear answer. Perhaps he died without ever revealing the truth. Perhaps he lived the rest of his life unnoticed. Or perhaps the evidence needed to solve the case has been sitting in an archive for decades, waiting for someone to recognize what everyone else has missed. Even today, investigators continue to examine old evidence using modern forensic technology. Every advancement in DNA analysis, every improvement in digital imaging, and every new investigative technique brings a small measure of hope. Hope that one day the silence surrounding this case will finally be broken. Until that day arrives, the Zodiac Killer remains unidentified. Not because investigators stopped searching, but because the evidence has never provided a definitive answer. Some mysteries fade with time. This one never did. If you found this investigation compelling, consider subscribing to The Hidden Dossier for more documentaries exploring true crime, unsolved mysteries, and the hidden stories behind history's most puzzling cases. And now, we leave you with the same question that has haunted investigators for more than 50 years. Who was the Zodiac Killer? Perhaps one day we'll finally know. The murders shocked Northern California. But it wasn't only the killings that terrified the public. It was what happened afterward. The Zodiac wanted the world to hear his voice. Days after the attacks, letters began arriving at newspaper offices. Each envelope contained handwritten messages. Some included disturbing details that had never been released to the public. Details that only the killer could have known. He demanded that newspapers publish his letters on their front pages. If they refused, he threatened to kill again. The media had a difficult choice: ignore the letters or risk another attack. Most newspapers chose to publish them. And with every headline, the fear spread even further. The mysterious writer signed each letter with the same strange symbol, a circle, crossed by a bold plus sign. And for the first time, he gave himself a name, the Zodiac. The letters became more disturbing with every message. Some contained threats, others mocked investigators. He claimed that police would never catch him. And with every new letter, public fear continued to grow. Then came the codes. Hidden inside several letters were complex cryptograms. The first contained 408 symbols. The Zodiac claimed that solving it would reveal his identity. Police, journalists, and amateur code breakers all tried to crack the message. Days passed. Then weeks. No one could solve it. Until a schoolteacher named Donald Harden and his wife Berryessa worked together from their home. Using logic, patience, and pattern analysis, they successfully decoded the message. But the result surprised everyone. Instead of revealing his name, the cipher delivered a terrifying confession. The writer claimed that killing people gave him the greatest thrill imaginable. He wrote that hunting human beings was more exciting than hunting wild animals. He even claimed that his victims would become his servants in the afterlife. Yet despite all those chilling words, he never revealed who he really was. The mystery remained. As investigators searched for answers, the Zodiac continued sending more letters, more threats, more taunts, and more questions than answers. Every new envelope reminded the public of one terrifying fact. The killer was still out there, watching, waiting, and always one step ahead. As the decades passed, technology continued to evolve. What investigators couldn't solve in the 1960s, modern forensic science might finally uncover. Hope returned to the case. Detectives carefully reopened old evidence. They examined handwritten letters, envelopes, postage stamps, and every piece of material that might still contain traces of the killer. The greatest hope was Dina. If even a tiny amount of uncontaminated genetic material could be recovered, it might finally reveal the identity of the Zodiac Killer. But solving a case this old is never simple. Many of the original letters had been handled by countless investigators, journalists, laboratory technicians, and evidence collectors. Over the years, some materials may have become contaminated. Experts continued to debate whether the available Dina truly belongs to the killer, or to someone who handled the evidence decades ago. Despite remarkable advances in forensic science, no confirmed Dina profile has identified the Zodiac Killer. Even today, investigators continue searching for answers. New technology is making it possible to examine evidence in ways that were unimaginable 50 years ago, and every breakthrough brings renewed hope. Alongside the investigation, theories have continued to grow. Some believe the Zodiac died decades ago. Others believe he simply stopped killing. Some investigators suspect that not every letter was written by the real Zodiac, while others believe the official list of victims may not tell the entire story. None of these theories has ever been proven. The truth remains hidden. So why has this case remained unsolved for more than half a century? The answer lies in several challenges. Forensic technology in the late 1960s was limited. Crime scenes produced very little physical evidence. Witness descriptions often conflicted with one another. Different law enforcement agencies investigated different crimes. And many critical decisions were made long before modern investigative techniques existed. When these obstacles are combined, one mystery becomes incredibly difficult to solve. Yet investigators have never completely given up. Every few years, new evidence is reviewed. New forensic methods are tested, and new questions are asked. Because somewhere, hidden within thousands of pages of reports, photographs, letters, and forgotten evidence, the answer may still exist, waiting for someone to finally uncover it. For decades, one message refused to give up its secrets. It became known as the 340 cipher. Unlike the first code, this one was far more complex. Investigators tried everything. Professional cryptographers examined it. Law enforcement agencies studied it. Thousands of amateur codebreakers searched for patterns. Year after year, every attempt ended the same way. Failure. More than 50 years passed. Then, in December of 2020, 3 independent codebreakers from different parts of the world achieved what many believed was impossible. They finally solved the cipher. The world waited for a shocking confession. Perhaps a real name, a hidden address, or the clue that would finally expose the Zodiac Killer. Instead, the message delivered something very different. The Zodiac mocked investigators once again. He dismissed television reports claiming he had been captured. He insisted that he was not afraid of the gas chamber, and once again he revealed nothing that could identify him. Even after half a century, the biggest question remained unanswered. Who was the Zodiac Killer? That question led investigators to examine dozens of suspects. Over the years, many names appeared in police files. Some were investigated for months, others for decades. But one suspect stood above all the others. Arthur Leigh Allen. Allen lived in Northern California. His background raised serious questions. Several people who knew him described unusual behavior. Some investigators believed his appearance resembled witness descriptions. Others pointed to his ownership of a Zodiac brand wristwatch, a coincidence that fueled years of speculation. There were also claims that he had spoken about hunting people and making homemade bombs. To many investigators, the pieces seemed to fit. But criminal investigations are built on evidence, not suspicion. When experts compared his fingerprints with those collected from Zodiac evidence, they did not match. His handwriting was examined. It failed to produce a conclusive match. Later, available DNA evidence also failed to identify him as the killer. Arthur Leigh Allen remains the most famous suspect, but he has never been officially identified as the Zodiac Killer. Other names also attracted attention: Lawrence Kane, Richard Gaikowski, and several others whose identities surfaced through books, documentaries, and independent investigations. Some resembled witness sketches. Some lived near crime scenes. Others had personal histories that raised questions. Yet every investigation reached the same conclusion. The evidence was never strong enough. Decades of investigation produced countless theories, but no suspect has ever been proven to be the Zodiac Killer. And once again, the mystery continued. If you enjoyed this investigation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Hidden Dossier for more true crime stories and unsolved mysteries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next mystery.